Welcome to the third project of Strathmore's 2020 online workshop series. This is Leslie of Leslie Writes It All with another creative watercoloring class for you. The piece that we'll be working on today is a journaling project centered around fall florals. The watercolors that we'll be using for this project is the same as the previous ones. It is the Daler-Rowney 24 color Aquafine watercolor pen set. And this is a journaling project that we will continue to add into our Strathmore 400 series cold press watercolor journal. In addition to that, I have some metallic gold paints. These are probably my favorite ones from Watercolors. It's their Finetech M600 palette. The watercolor brushes that we'll be using are the Princeton Velvetouch in this round size 4 and 8. The brush marker that I'll be using is a Caron Brush Marker Pro in black. And lastly, we have a Sakura Micron in 05 to do some monoline lettering. For this project, we're not going to do any practicing ahead of time because it's really just one style of flower that we're going to be just painting over and over. So you're going to start by using the larger brush that you have. Again, this is the Princeton Velvetouch in a size 8, and I'll be using the warmer colors of this palette, like I said, for a fall themed floral project. And what I like to do ahead of time is kind of anticipate the colors I'll be using, and what I do is I kind of put them from the little pans into the metal palette part. So I know that I'm going to be using a lot of the warmer colors. That includes these oranges, pinks, and yellows. So I will be creating a little bit of a wet palette area so I can pull up the paint easier from there. So the first step in painting these very loose abstract florals is to create a floral center. And here I'm using like an orange pinkish color to just apply kind of dots in the center using just the very tip of this round 8 brush. Then we're going to create these petals by using the flatter side of the brush, and I am using a contrasting color. So you'll notice that the centers are like a pinkish color, and then I'm using a yellow color for the petals. So it's okay to mix colors into. As you can see, I added some of that orange back into the petals, but it's just kind of a nice contrast from the center to the petals by using different colors. Alright, so if you didn't catch that, we're going to do it again. We're going to use the flat side of the round 8 brush to create kind of a roundish petal. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can leave some areas blank for negative space so it doesn't look like one giant blob. But you're basically going to pull color from the center and create a very like fluffy texture to these flowers. Typically I can fit anywhere from 3 to 4 petals around the center of this flower. If you lose some of your color when you're pulling it out from the center, you can dot it back in, and that creates kind of a pretty bleed that comes from the center of the flower outwards. And we're just going to repeat this series of flowers all over. You want to cover the journal, not completely because we are going to be adding other embellishments on, but just have them touching each other or next to each other. You want to fill the page with these like really pretty soft florals. So like I said, paint the center using a series of dots or like little hashes, and then we're just going to use a different color to pull out from the center these like little fluffy petals. And you'll notice that for one flower I'm not using only one color. So within one flower you'll see petals that range from a peach color to a yellow back to that really intense pink. So in nature you're not going to see your petals be perfectly one color. So just to create that illusion of like just a little variability and also like kind of the imperfectness of nature, you're going to just mix in different colors, and that creates a little bit more visual interest in your painting as well. And it's okay to want to add color back in where you feel like it's lacking. I try to do that when the paint is still wet, so you'll notice that that flower there kind of lost that high contrast center. So I'm just dotting in color, and you can see that while it's wet it'll still bleed, but if it's dry it kind of stays as like that color just sits on top of the paint that you've already laid on. So here I'm going to switch it out, and I'm going to put a yellow center and going to add some pinks and oranges into this and pull from the center as well. So it's going to be the same type of flower, just going to be a little bit inverted in the color scheme. And remember, this is a very loose style, so you don't have to be exactly or very precise with it. If you'll notice, I'm adding like little additional details to the petals, and that just adds a little bit of negative space, which is blank white space. That way it doesn't look like, you know, one blob of color. So just keep it loose. You want to paint kind of quickly, but be intentional with your strokes. And here I kind of didn't really like that the yellow wasn't really popping as much, so I'm going to go back and add some more pink detailing in when it's wet. So like I said, I really love watching the colors bleed, so you do want to work quickly so that you do see some of those bleeds instead of having really harsh paint lines. So these flowers are going to be the main focal points of our piece here, but you do want to leave a few white spaces because we're going to add in some gold detailing, and if the whole page is covered in all of these florals, you're not going to really have any space to add that. So just be mindful when you are covering your page to just make sure that we leave some white spaces to add some of that gold detailing, which is going to be just a really pretty accent to these flowers. Okay, so since most of this page is filled up, I do want to add a little bit more of this floral color in. So I'm just going to be painting like not whole flowers, but just kind of imagine if they were kind of cut off by the page. So it's going to look like just a pattern that's repeating. So just along the edges and the corners of the journal, I'm going to paint maybe one petal just to convey maybe there's a whole flower there, but it's cut off because the page isn't large enough to show it. But just there, just to add a little bit more color and fill it in. At this point, I'm pretty happy with what we have. Like I said, there are some white spaces, but I'm gonna plan to leave that for some of that gold detailing. And what we're gonna do now is switch our brush to this round size 2 brush. With metallic paints, you do need to kind of wet it ahead of time because there are mica particles that take a little bit time for the water to seep in and make the paint more usable. Once you're happy with the consistency of that paint, where it's not too thick or too thin, you really want it to show up. So if it's too thin, It's going to be difficult to see on the page, and if it's too thick, it's going to feel like a slurry that you're painting with. So just continue to add water or continue to mix as needed, and then we're going to just start painting some gold leaves into our painting. So this actually just built on what we learned from the first class, which is the home painting. So we're just going to add leaf details just to cover some of the space. It's just a nice little accent to match with the fall colors that we already started using. So what I'm doing is just looking for areas of white space that I think would look really nice with some gold detailing. So I chose to use a warmer, more yellow gold because of the colors that we chose for the flowers. I think it's just a nice warm color that pops but matches with the colors we already chose. And you might recognize the berry that I'm painting right now is the exact same one that we used as one of the examples in the home piece. It is the berries that we use there. So if you still have that practice sheet out, I would definitely use that as reference. It'll help kind of guide you to see what kind of leaf you want to paint in the blank spaces of this project. And because we learned how to be flexible in adding or subtracting leaves to fit into a space, then it will be kind of the perfect thing to assist you here in order to fill in some of the spaces that we have in this project. And again, the point of this creative watercoloring class is really just to explore your creativity. There's, again, no right or wrong way to do this. I kind of just take a look and see what spaces need to be filled in. So I kind of just determine what size leaf I want, just play with the different sizes, create a little bit of variety, and that's just going to make your painting much more interesting to look at. And feel free to add in any designs that you want of your own. I like to add tiny leaves, little berries, dots, and things like that to fill in this space. I think that gold is just a really pretty embellishment and adds like a really sparkly detail to an already kind of pretty color scheme. And remember that you don't have to paint in a static way. If you need to move your journal, it's nice and small, so it's easy to rotate. So just angle it the best way that's convenient or most comfortable for you. I'm right-handed, so obviously I'm rotating in a way that's easiest for my hand to access the pages, but whatever works for you, makes it easier for you to paint or see, go ahead and do that. And again, I just want to point out the reason why I do prefer to use round tip brushes for painting is that it gives you a lot of room to create really thin lines like the stems, but also allows you to flatten your brush to create larger, broader strokes like this leaf here. So instead of buying multiple brushes, this brush kind of does it all. I just think these colors and adding these gold embellishments would be really cute if you're a bullet journaler or someone who likes to journal or keep a journal of their watercolor pieces. It kind of commemorates the season. So I love painting fall stuff. I love fall colors. I like really warm tones, so this is right up my alley, but I hope you guys enjoy painting in this style also. And just keep adding leaves until you're happy with the piece. I'm pretty much done with the leaves that I'm going to add to this right now. So I'm just going in, seeing areas that I might want to fill in a little bit with these little dots or these little circles. I am mindful to keep the center of the piece a little bit more open since we will be lettering there. So just keep that in mind when you're finishing up the gold embellishment part. So for now, we're going to set our watercolor piece aside and get started on the brush lettering portion. I am using a scratch piece of paper. I use this to help me kind of center and determine the size and composition before I actually letter on the piece. So if you're familiar with brush lettering, go ahead and use brush lettering to write the word fall. If you are not familiar with brush lettering, you can certainly refer to the previous class, the one that we did faux calligraphy for the word light, and use that technique here instead. And once you're done writing in the word fall, I just use a monoline pen to write in "is in the air." I'm going to add a tiny little heart just because it's my favorite season. And now I'm going to use that sheet as a reference, kind of centering it in where I want to have it placed in the watercolor piece. I fold the paper, hold it up, that way I kind of have a sense of where I'm going to start, and then I just am mindful of the size that I'm writing, so it should fall center pretty close to what we did in our sample. And this is always a scary part because I'm not sure if I'll ever mess up, but I hate to actually pencil it in because my lettering and my penciling, actually, I don't know if they're just not the same, so I never really get the same results. So I kind of like freehanding it, but kind of in an assisted way. If you are not confident and you feel like you want to use pencil, certainly feel free to. I just don't prefer it, so this is my method. Now I'm going to fold the other half and then figure out how to write the "is in the air" section right under that. So this is my method. Please feel free to use a method that works for you. If you are more comfortable penciling it in, don't feel like my way is the only way to do this. And again, I just want you guys to have fun with this, so no stress here. And lastly, looking at the piece, I think it needs a little bit more contrast, so what we're going to do is just fill in with a little bit of the black in some of the centers of the flowers. I think it'll put an interesting pop on the flowers, and it also kind of ties in with the black of our lettering. So I'm using black. I have been known to use Payne's Gray as well, but either color works really well for the purposes of what we're doing. All I'm really doing now is painting tiny little circles inside the centers of each flower. So I'm just kind of choosing a random number and filling it in. So some circles will be larger and some circles will be smaller. But I think it does give these flowers a little bit more of contrast, since the whole painting is basically in one color scheme. I think it also kind of ties in the black letters that we chose to write in. So I think this kind of pulls the piece into a more like cohesive look. But really, this is a stylistic choice that I chose to make. I think it just pops a little bit better, but if you were happy with how your piece looked before adding the black circles, you certainly feel free to leave it like that. But let me know in the comments if you prefer it this way or not. There's one flower that's right in the center of where the word fall is, and I'm actually choosing to leave that one empty because I don't want it to interfere with the letters. But here is the final piece. And that's that for the third class in our Strathmore 2020 online workshop series. I hope you will join me for the fourth and final class, which is the geometric painting.